It was like off Board Avenue, like more central in town. We lived with our grandparents for a while, and then we moved down to Elgin Avenue, and as we, as time go by. But basically, around in this area, it was all this family. My uncles, my aunts, all of them, we all grew up right in the same area where we're living right now. Growing up those days, we hardly had any cars. Bicycles was more what we used to mode of transportation, and the roads were very narrow, and they were not. There was not no asphalt at all. It was a marl on the roads, and we had people who used to try to keep the roads, and especially around Christmas time, a group of people would clean the roads because there was a lot of grass growing on the sides of the road. We got paid for those. But on the whole, I mean, over the years, things gradually changed. With I guess with the coming of motorbikes, motorcycles, the roads had to be built and widened and everything else like that. But before that, we were happy-go-lucky. We didn't have to worry about being run over by a car or anything like that. We just walked free, and it was a good life growing up here at those times. Do you want to tell me something about the hospital road, how it was?
I think this hospital road was built in the early 50s. And I remember as a boy coming out here watching them build this road. No machinery. Everything on this hospital road was done by hand. Right now, where the immigration is now, they got a lot. There was a whole lot of marl from there. There was a big hole there. They dug out, and they got a lot of marl to build this road, plus other parts in town. The marl went to, and I think we was where that marl, the way you see, maybe the immigration of it, that was our first garbage dump. And you imagine, this is the hospital here, and this is garbage dump right in front of the hospital. And I remember, and you see people outside with their pot, cooking. Firewood and the pots on a tree block or stake. He cooked outside the hospital.
So why were they cooking outside the hospital? Were they cooking for people that were in
the hospital?
For patients?
Patient. Sometimes the patient was so. Sometimes I never had no patient in the hospital.
And they were still cooking.
Okay, my brother, myself, and my sister, we lived over here where my mother was from. My father was from a place called Rock Hole. And especially like every Sunday after church, my grandfather, Lishman Godfrey, would meet us by the church and take us over to Rock Hole to spend the day with his family. And at 5 o'clock Sunday evening, he would bring us back home. That was a ritual, that was a must. Every Sunday we had to visit those. But also growing up, I spent a lot of time over there with my grandparents, so that I get to know a lot of history about the family and everything like that. But on the whole, we were three. My sister, my brother, we were the only three grandchildren on my father's side, from his parents. So we were kind of special in a lot of ways. There, our grandparents were very loving, very caring, and they see that we got along very good. And also, growing up, we went to school, the old schoolhouse which was on the waterfront. There was an old schoolhouse there. And we had a teacher, Teacher Hill, and Miss Euna Bush was the assistant teacher there at the time. And we were able to leave school at 12 o'clock, go home, have lunch, and be back to school at 1 o'clock. But when I first started going to the school there, I was not 7 years of age. So I had to sit on the platform until I became 7. Then I could move down with the group of kids at school, So I would sit upstairs there, and myself and Arthur, we were the same age. We used to do a lot of drawing and stuff like that, But once I became 7, I moved down to regular classroom and everything like that. And from there on, I stayed with that school until 1949 when the church, Amstel United Church or the Presbyterian Church, they started the Cayman Island High School. We moved back to the back of the library, which is the base, and there was your father, Mr. Gray, was one of the teachers, Reverend George Hicks, and also Reverend Ricketts. They were the teachers from Jamaica, and that was the beginning of Cayman High School. So we end up calling ourselves for 49ers because we were there on the first day of school started. And then I went to school until the year 1952 when I graduated. And then I worked with Mark Taggart's, R.E. Mark Taggart's, in his store as a clerk. But that was from 1952 to 1955. And in 55, then I went to sea as a merchant seaman. I worked with national bulk carriers from 1955 till 1965. I started as a messman. I was working in the galley peeling potatoes and stuff. And I advanced myself to become second cook. Then I became chief cook, and when I left, I was steward. I was in charge of the whole ordering food for the supply, which we had to carry supply for like 3 months. And on the ships we traveled on oil tankers. We went all the way up to the Persian Gulf and back to America. 30 days round trip took us.
Tell me about your communication with home during that time.
Well, communicating with home, we wrote letters, and wherever we were, the letters were posted. So wherever we were, the letters somehow were sent to us, So because being like 30 days, before you get back to the States or wherever, the letters were forwarded on to us. So whenever we got a letter from home, we were so happy to know what was really happening. Because those days, you didn't have telephone or something like we have now, that you could just pick up and make communications. That was rough. I wouldn't know till weeks later, but then as things progressed, they had what they call the cable and wireless. They had what we call like a sparks on the ship, and they could communicate with him, through Moss, what you call them. And he would bring a message for you.
You could get a message actually on the ship.
Code, yeah.
Well, that would have been wonderful, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was one, especially with the girls. If they had a younger sibling, she had to go with him wherever he went. And the point is, we could not go if you really loved or intended a young lady. You had to get permission to go to the home.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you really had good intentions, then you had to write a letter asking permission from the parents to visit the young lady at home. And if you went to the home, it's like the whole family, everybody sat around. You were not left too much alone with that young lady. Sometimes if you were left alone, the older person at home, especially the mother or grandparent, they sat in the room and they would not go to sleep. And 9 o'clock come, you had it's time to leave.
Right.
Well, they would either write you back or maybe word them out, tell you maybe yes or no. This is the whole thing about it.
Okay.
And the point is, if you wrote a letter with good intentions and you and the young lady were really in love maybe, and you did not, you forfeit that deal with the letter, right? It was all breach of promise because you promised you were going to write the letter, and you would end up in court. You had to pay.
Oh my goodness.
They would carry to court and sue you, for breach of promise.
So you really had to commit when you wrote that letter?
That letter. It was a commitment, and if you wrote that commitment.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can I ask you, did you write any letters?
No, I tell you, I had a girlfriend in West Bay. She wanted me to write a letter, but I didn't. But strange enough, I was able to go to the home. People that liked me, I was able to go to the home, but I did not write that letter. So after I left and went away, that was nothing. I used to ride a bicycle maybe twice a week going to West Bay. No lights on the road, No lights on the road, just a flashlight on my bicycle. And sometimes you got bogged with sun and everything else going there, but you just get up and move on. That's all. And crossing the graveyards was kind of scary and everything else. But just because you love the girl, you want to go. That's the meaning about it.
So how long did that journey take you?
Right and getting down there, I would say about maybe half an hour. Or,
half an hour going?
Going in half an hour.
And then you have your little visit?
Yeah, and come back.
And come back.
But by 9 o'clock, you had to leave the house. Get back.
Can't remember too, but I started on by right supermarket.
Okay.
So, and then he got a bit closer with a cousin of mine, got married, and I was groomsman, and those who were surprised did, and she was my friend.
Ah, so you
Okay.
walked together, as they
We
used to
walked
call it.
together. From then on, it just blossomed.
Wonderful.
So right now, I think 52 years or something like that. Yeah.
I went to New York.
You lived
See,
in New
because
York.
at the time going to sea, went from 1955. I went to sea. Then we used to go out of Mobile, Alabama, and that's where I met my wife in Mobile.
Ah,
We got married in 1959.
so your courtship and marriage was sort of
Yeah. Because I decided
a different
I was not
thing.
going to get married in Cayman because most I had girlfriends here, but sometimes my parents it's not good enough for you. They had that attitude in Cayman a whole lot. This one wasn't good enough for you and all that kind of stuff. So I swore, I said, when I leave home, I was not going to marry anyone in Cayman. It's really true. That's what.
You were going to
So-
find you a girl.
Yeah. So I got married in Mobile in 1959, and my wife came here, and I was still on the ships, but then after a while I filed for my U.S. Residency in 1965. I moved to New York, and my family moved to New York.
Ah, okay. And
So we've been married now about 61 years. Yeah, last year we
Wonderful.
celebrated our 60th anniversary. Yeah. Well, at the time I was on the ship, it was like 2 weeks were in and out like that, So it was not good like that. Yeah, and I took part in his wedding because I was away in New York at the time. So when he was getting married, I came home especially for that occasion, and I
to
was
be his best man.
man at his wedding. Yeah, that's very good. On
Still
New Year,
he's my best man.
There you go. See, we've got the pair right together here today.
we stay together all the time. Morning, I have to come to visit him. At 7 o'clock, he looks for me to come over. If I don't come, he's looking what's happened to me. Evening time, after work again. If I'm not over here by 7:30, he's calling. What's wrong with you? Are you coming over tonight? And that's all we had the whole. I mean, we're very close, That's the whole thing. We sit and we discuss anything, we chat. And basically, we do come to the same conclusions about everything else.
By the way, we were young men. We slept in the same bed, and he went to sea.
Sure, because in those days, we didn't have a whole lot of room. We couldn't have a room for yourself in the first
Yeah.
place. So we just had a room, the two of us. So my sister had a room. My father had a room, but then there was a room just for the two of us. That's right. Yeah. Well, I was out to sea, and at the time, I think my father he built a place. That was in about 1958.
58.
58. They opened. Yeah, it was my sister and my mother who were run the business, and it was just a restaurant. And they catered. At the time, Triple C School was off, which they would hold over somewhere up that area.
Yes.
And then the kids, most of them used to come there to eat because they were from out of town. And the parents could not make lunch for them to bring to school. So they came and they got lunch. And basically most of the parents would pay my people like at the ending of the month because a lot of their fathers were out to sea. And they got allotment once a month. So whenever they got the money, they would end up paying, We didn't have any restaurants around. No fast food places or anything like that at all.
Right.
Yeah.
In those days, with pound, shilling, and pence, and I think that a meal was around 2 shillings or 2 and 6. So you imagine.
That's the equivalent 25 cents. Yeah.
My wife's name was Esther Bernicia Watler, but she was known as Bernicia. But at that time, it seemed like all the Caymanians were called by the second name instead of the first name. Well, we went to school together, and time was coming up, so I can't remember the exact time, but we came up through school together. When I started, she was a little ahead of me because she was a year, 9 months older than me. The time was I was going to look for my girlfriend. We left school together, same time. And at that time, Bernicia had been brought up by an old lady who lived up on the hill there by the name of Miss Tilliana Dixon. And she was at that time, when we left school, we were picking up this boyfriend, girlfriend. And then I started, we got closer, and I asked, Antilla was living at the time with her niece, Miss Venida Guzan. And I asked Mrs. Guzan if I could come to her house to visit to look for Bernicia. She told me yes. And I started visiting there then to look for Bernicia. And we until it was hard to attend. She wasn't easy. We used to, when I go there, they had a small living room, because the houses in that time was small houses, probably about 8 by 10. Let's say she was living in a room off of that living area, let's say on the left side. And when I go there, she and I would sit by a window on the east side until it would the doorway entered there, until it would lie in that doorway with part of one side of the room and part on the other side. So I remember we had a little center table. That's a small center table. And they had a tablecloth on that hang low, close to the floor. I remember until pinning that tablecloth off underneath so she could have a clear view of me and her. I mean, she was within hearing distance because it wasn't far. And she also wanted to have that clear view. So, okay. I continued then for the time that until I was living with Miss Venida while her house was being repaired. When her house was finished with the repair, they moved back up on the hill in her house. So I remember I still go up there to look for Bernicia, and she and I would sit again until I was in the restroom. The same thing, she would sit. she would sit like halfway inside that room and halfway outside. And she was very strict on time. She said, well, 9 o'clock, I have to leave. So I remember one night, and we wasn't paying attention to the time. The time ran over until I got up and took the door. She said, well, it must be 9 o'clock in hell now. So anyway, well, that was over. I'm sorry until then, but we wasn't thinking about time. It slipped by. Well, I've been talking about my plans for the future. And because Bernicia said that she wasn't marrying a man unless he showed her the 4 walls of his house. And we've been discussing things around that, And on top of that now, her father, Mr. Julius Rankin, he wasn't approving of the match of me and her. So she said, "Well, Father, why you don't want me with Trevor?" Well, he said, he's too young and I got anything to give you. She said, "Well, anything else?" "No, that's all." He said, "Well, he's young, yes, but he got ambition, so give him a chance." Okay. And, well, she didn't live in the house where her father lived. Her father was living elsewhere. So as time went on, then he wasn't agreeable for it, but me and her kept on. And the day came when I got my call to go to sea. But one of the little bit that I would come into when they changed with the timing, I decided to play until a trick. Of that time, nobody had wristwatches. And I decided the family had a table clock. So I decided to borrow that table clock and carry it and put until it to be the timekeeper. So, and night I carried that clock, you could hear tick, tick, tick going up through the street. Anyway, I placed the clock right in front of her until it was that she was looking at the face. I said, "Well, until the clock is here, I want you to be the timekeeper and tell us when time is up." Because we going on with interesting ourselves, studying time. So time went on. 9 o'clock, I'm sure, came and gone. And until I'm not saying anything, and it must have been running nigh on 10. And I get up and say, "Well, it's time to go." "Okay, until thank you for keeping time for us. I'm going home now." But until I couldn't tell me the time because she couldn't read time. so that was a trick. So that one went by. But where we were, I'll reward it back to that. First, I would really trick her when she sit down in the bench. And I was sitting behind her. She had long hair. I would tie a sash to the bench or something. But that's what annoyed her. But then, I was very kind to her and all that. So she got interested. And while she was still, viewing me as not a suitable person for her, she told her, until the aunt where we were staying where I was visiting her first, that I would, here too aggravating, I'd shoot myself before I marry him. And she said, "Oh, Miss Renard," I told her before, she said that, no hit him. He might be your wife yet. He might be your husband yet." She said, "I will shoot myself before I marry him." And the day of our wedding, she dressed at Miss Renaita's place. And while she was finished dressing, Miss Renaita showed her head in the door and said, "I'll shoot myself if I don't marry him today." So, anyway, we had a good wedding. I'll tell you what's about. I got to tell you about getting the house first. She not gonna marry me unless she see the four walls. So the first trip to sea was 18.5 months. And I went home for a short vacation. The company said, "We'll call you back in 2 weeks to fly to Japan to bring up the new super tanker, along with the other crew members." So we did that. I came home 2 weeks and after that. After I went back then, my stepfather started my house, building my house here, the same area where we're sitting now with gardens all over there. And he continued building with what funds I saved first, and then the current funds that I was sending home here. Till I got the house closed up, all the roof on it, the doors and windows in, and I was intending to make another trip to sea before marrying. But Mauricia wasn't happy at Antilles anymore, because until Cayman were treating her like a little girl, and she was now a woman, 22 years old. So I tell her, I say, "Okay, when I come home after this trip now, we'll get married." So I went, after 18 months then I went home. I got home on the 29th of November, and we married on the 12th of December.